My name is Rachel Lynn Morris. And at 38, I knew the moment I walked into that dining hall that something was off. The chairs were arranged in a neat horseshoe around a long rectangular table, white linen draped edge to edge, wine glasses sparkling under soft string lights. And there were 12 of them, 12 chairs, for 13 people. Jason's mom, Karen, waved me over with a bright smile and a flutter of her hand, like she was hosting a charity gala. Jason was already seated, laughing at something his cousin Marcus said. He looked up at me and grinned, almost sheepish. "Oh, guess we miscounted," he said, with that chuckle he uses when he doesn't want something to be a problem. The family laughed. Not mean, not loud, just that light, dismissive kind. The kind that lets you know you're the only one who feels weird. I stood there, not moving. No one offered to grab an extra chair. No one stood to make space. Karen leaned toward the waitress and said, "We'll just squeeze someone in later, it's fine." But it wasn't. Because they hadn't squeezed me in. They hadn't counted me in. I looked at the table. My place wasn't just missing. It had never existed. I felt something hot start to rise in my throat. But I swallowed it. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even flinch. I smiled the same tight-lipped, polite smile they'd trained me to wear over the last 10 years. "Seems I'm not family," I said. Just that. And I turned around and walked out. No one followed. Not Jason. Not his sister. Not even the woman who used to call me sweetheart back when we first got engaged. I didn't speed up. Didn't slam the door. I just kept walking. Across the tile. Through the foyer. Out into the thick Kentucky night. By the time I got back to my car, I couldn't feel my legs. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys. They clattered to the asphalt like a fire alarm only I could hear. I stood there for a second. Just breathing. Just being. Just existing. Alone. Outside the party. Again. I slid into the driver's seat and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. That's when the real wave hit. Not the sadness, the knowing. That quiet, nauseating knowing. They didn't forget. They excluded me. 30 minutes later, the phone calls started. Missed calls. 2, 3, 5. Texts from Jason. "Where are you? Are you okay? Come back, Mom's freaking out." Then, one from Shelley. They figured it out. Karen's face went ghost white. "You okay?" I didn't answer anyone. I just drove home, parked in the driveway, turned off the ignition, and sat there. The silence inside the car was louder than the dinner had ever been. You see, they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know the woman who forgot to count me had also removed my name from the catering email list. They didn't know I'd made the reservation with my own login, or that I'd paid the deposit with my own severance check. They didn't know I'd called the restaurant earlier that day and said, "Cancel the dinner. Entire event. Thank you." I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was done. They hadn't saved me a seat. So I canceled the entire table. I looked down at my phone again. More notifications. Jason still hadn't said the one thing that might have mattered. "I'm sorry." I watched the porch light flicker against the trees. A moth beat itself against the screen door like it didn't know it didn't belong. And I wondered, if I hadn't walked out, would anyone have noticed I was never seated? Part 2. I used to believe that time softened people. That if I just gave it enough years, enough holidays, enough casseroles and thank you notes, Jason's family would start to see me as one of them. Turns out, time doesn't soften people. It just wears you down. Until you forget who you were before you started trying to earn your place. I still remember the day of our wedding. We'd rented the rec hall at that church off Highway 27, the one with the red doors and flickering fluorescent lights. I was too nervous to eat. Jason was sweating through his shirt. And Karen? Karen was orchestrating the table settings like she was preparing for a White House dinner. She had special cloth napkins. Ivory. satin trimmed, starched like museum pieces. Her side of the family got those. My side? Paper napkins. Standard white. Pulled from a Costco pack she claimed she found last minute. When I asked her why the difference, she just smiled and said, "Oh, honey, it's not that deep." But it was. It always was. That was my first real taste of being other. Not hated. Just excluded. Politely. Like I hadn't quite passed the invisible test. It happened over and over. The family group photo at Thanksgiving, I was in the kitchen getting rolls out of the oven when they called everyone out back. By the time I joined, the shutter had already clicked. "Oh well," Karen said. "Next year." Group texts where I'd find out about baby showers only after someone mentioned it in passing. Gift exchanges I didn't know I was supposed to participate in. One year, I made a whole pumpkin pie from scratch. Karen brought a store-bought cheesecake, and hers was the one everyone passed around for seconds. Shelley saw it early. She pulled me aside at a BBQ once, the kind where the women sat around talking about vacation homes, and the men argued about grill temperature like it was religion. She said, "They don't want you in the family. They want you orbiting around it." Emmers. I laughed it off. Said she was being dramatic. I told her, "They'll come around. People just need time." She looked at me like I'd handed her my last piece of hope wrapped in tinfoil. "You sure you're willing to wait that long?" she asked. I told her I was. I shouldn't have been. Jason never saw it. Or if he did, he filed it under, "Don't rock the boat." He'd shrug when I brought it up. Say things like, "That's just how she is. She forgets things. I menu." She didn't mean it like that. It's amazing how many bruises a person can overlook when they don't want to admit they're watching you bleed. I wish I could say there was one big betrayal. A single moment I could point to and say, This was the crack that split everything open." But it wasn't like that. It was years of paper napkins, years of silence, years of hoping someone would finally look at me and say, "We're glad you're here." And then came the miscarriage, 2 years ago. Jason and I had only told his family the week before. Karen didn't even call after we lost the baby. Not a text. Not a card. Nothing. Jason said she was giving us space. But space from what? From grief? From love? Or from the discomfort of having to acknowledge that I existed beyond what was convenient? I started noticing it more after that. The way Karen introduced me at church. "This is Jason's wife." Not Rachel. Just a title. The way Jason would change the subject when I brought up his mother. The way I started to lower my own voice around his family. Like shrinking would keep me safe. You don't realize how much you've disappeared until you're standing in a room full of people who don't see you, and you're not even surprised. I'm not angry. Not exactly. I'm just tired of hosting my own disappearance. There was a time I thought loyalty meant swallowing your feelings, so other people could digest theirs more easily. But I've been quiet for a long time now, and it hasn't made me safe. It's just made me invisible. I don't know what I expected from this birthday dinner. But part of me, the part I used to trust, thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe I'd finally be seen. And now I'm starting to wonder why I've spent so long setting tables for people who never brought a seat for me. Part 3. There's a strange kind of grief that comes from realizing your silence didn't buy you peace. It just paid for your own erasure. I sat at the kitchen table that morning. Coffee gone cold. Laptop open. The cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to say something I still hadn't found the words for. I wasn't ready to cancel anything. But I also wasn't ready to keep pretending this was just another birthday dinner. So I opened the last email thread with the event planner. Scrolled down. Found the final guest confirmation form Karen had sent over. My name wasn't on it. No. Rachel Morris. Daughter-in-law. Not even a blank placeholder. Just gone. Like I'd never been part of it to begin with. I zoomed in. Read it 3 times. hoping it was a formatting error. It wasn't. Jason walked in behind me, yawning. He kissed the top of my head out of habit. Not noticing my shoulders didn't lift. "Big week ahead," he said, already pouring cereal. "Mom said she's got something special planned for the toast." I closed the laptop. She always does. He didn't notice the tightness in my voice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't want to deal with it. He crunched a spoonful and said, "You okay?" "I'm fine." It was a reflex, that line. My go-to armor. And just like that, the conversation moved on, like it always did. Later that afternoon, I called Shelley. I didn't plan to, but my hands dialed her number before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. "You sound tight." "I found the guest list," I said. Karen took me off it. A long pause. "Rach. And Jason doesn't know. He's still talking like this dinner's about family." "Well," she said. "It is. Just not you." I didn't say anything. Then Shelley hit me with it. "If this were your daughter, being treated like this, would you tell her to keep quiet?" I closed my eyes. "Let that sit." "No," I whispered. "I'd tell her to burn the whole table down." That evening, I went into the garage to get something from the freezer, and I saw it. A folded stack of place cards, still sealed in plastic. I'd ordered them weeks ago, each name printed in gold script, except mine, because Karen said she'd take care of the family section. I walked back into the house and dropped the place cards into the trash, watched them disappear under the coffee filter and banana peels. Jason was in the living room, watching some old rerun, laughing. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, babe, Mom said we might get an extra dessert option. You want lemon bars?" My stomach turned. I sat beside him. "Was your ex invited?" He blinked. "What? Was Erin invited to the dinner?" He hesitated. Sierra mentioned she might be there. Something about old times. "Head table?" He looked down. "I don't know." But he did. He always knew. He just didn't want to say it out loud. And suddenly it wasn't about the dinner, or the seating, or the cake. It was about every time I'd swallowed my pride, so his mother wouldn't be uncomfortable. Every time I'd let it slide. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, pulled a sticky note off the fridge, and wrote one word. "Enough." Stuck it to the back of my phone. A reminder. Not a declaration. Not yet. But close. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jason was snoring lightly beside me. The kind of sleep you earn when nothing weighs on you. He laid awake, watching the ceiling, thinking about all the invisible labor I'd given this family. The favors, the holidays, the second chances, the money. I remembered the cake deposit, the decorations, the gas money for errands no one thanked me for. It had all added up, not in dollars, but in dents. And now I was emptying a balance I hadn't even agreed to carry. The next morning, I opened my laptop again. This time I didn't check the guest list. I opened the draft email, put the cursor right where I'd left it. Part 4. There's a moment right before you make a choice you can't take back where your body goes completely still. Not scared. Not angry. Just still. That's how I felt sitting at my kitchen table, finger hovering over the send button. The email was open. The subject line read, "Holloway Dinner. Event cancellation confirmation." I had drafted the message 2 nights ago, edited it once, then again, then deleted all the edits. Now it was simple. Just one sentence. "Please cancel the reservation and catering. Thank you for your help." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just closure. I looked out the window. Jason was in the driveway, checking tire pressure. He wasn't even thinking about the dinner. Or me. The sun hit his shoulders like it always had. And for a moment, I almost softened. Almost told myself this was petty. Dramatic. Too final. But then I remembered the head table. and the missing chair, and the smile on Karen's face when she said, "Oops." I clicked. Sent. Done. It was like cutting a string that had been wrapped around my ribs for years. I could breathe again, not deeply, but differently. I closed my laptop and stood up too fast. Felt the blood rush through my ears. Went to pour a glass of water, and that's when I saw an envelope sticking out from the catch-all drawer. The one near the sink that collects takeout menus and random pens. I pulled it out. It was the receipt from the catering deposit, dated 2 months ago, paid in full with my severance check. My name on it. My email. My last official act as a member of the Holloway family, I suppose. I stared at the paper, then folded it once, then again, then shoved it into the trash, deep under the coffee grounds and onion skins. A few minutes later, I texted Shelley. "It's done." She didn't ask what I meant, just replied, "Proud of you. Don't waver." I didn't tell Jason, not because I was afraid of his reaction, but because I already knew what it would be. A nervous laugh, a quiet, "Really, Rach?" A guilt trip about how this will look. I didn't need a chorus of justifications. I didn't need to be understood anymore. I needed to be done. That evening, Jason grilled burgers in the backyard, while I chopped lettuce in the kitchen. We moved like two people who still shared a life, but no longer shared the meaning of it. He called through the screen door, "Can you grab the ketchup?" I did. Handed it to him without meeting his eyes. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. Later, as we sat on the couch, a rerun of some home renovation show playing in the background, I kept thinking about how many hours I'd spent planning that dinner. The emails, the catering menu, the seating chart. I'd even pre-ordered special place cards with gold lettering, had them shipped express. I threw those away last week, quietly. Like everything else, Jason fell asleep on the couch, his mouth open slightly, one sock half off, remote still in his hand. I looked peaceful, and all I could think was, he doesn't know the dinner's gone. He doesn't know his mother is about to panic. He doesn't know that I've finally stopped trying. I walked into the kitchen. The fridge hummed low, steady, like white noise for my chest. I stood there for a long time, the cool air touching my skin, letting silence fill the spaces where I used to put my hope. I wasn't afraid of what came next, just curious how long it would take for anyone to notice. Part 5. The first call came just after lunch. Jason had the day off. His schedule was light this week, and I guess Karen had timed it that way. Her timing was always precise. I was wiping down the counters when I heard his phone buzz in the next room. Then again. He came into the kitchen, phone in hand, forehead creased. "Mom says something's wrong with the dinner." I didn't look up, just kept scrubbing the edge of the stove like it mattered. "Is that so?" He leaned against the doorframe, confused. "The restaurant called her, said the event was canceled." I finally looked at him. "And?" He hesitated. "Did you know about that?" I folded the dish towel. "Slow." "Yes." His eyebrows twitched. "Wait, you canceled it?" I nodded once. No apology. No dramatic pause. Just truth. He stared at me like I'd just told him I was moving to Alaska. "Why?" I didn't answer. Because it wasn't a question that deserved an answer. Not after everything. He blinked, then gave a half laugh. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more." He set his phone on the counter, running a hand down his face like he needed to wipe the whole moment away. "She's freaking out. Says the family's gonna think it was her fault." I shrugged. "Maybe it is." He looked at me. Really looked. But not with anger. With a kind of loss. Like someone just realizing a door had been closed and locked from the inside. That evening, I made dinner out of habit. Skillet potatoes and grilled cheese. Nothing special. Jason didn't say much. He moved around the kitchen like he didn't quite know where to stand. Like the space between us was suddenly marked. He pulled plates down like he always did, set two on the table, then paused. "What's going on, Rachel?" he asked, not looking at me. I placed the pan on a trivet, turned off the stove. "What's always been going on? You're just noticing." He finally met my eyes. "You could have just said something." "I have." After dinner, he retreated to the garage, muttering something about tools he needed to reorganize. I sat at the table alone, still chewing my last bite. Even though it had gone cold, my phone buzzed. "Shelley, they're going wild on the church Facebook page. Karen said the venue canceled last minute and left her in tears. Total victim mode." I stared at the message, felt my throat tighten, but not from guilt, from exhaustion. The church group. Of course. Another stage for Karen to perform her version of the truth. And no doubt, I was being cast as the villain. Funny how easy it is to play that role. When you stop auditioning for anything else. Jason didn't bring it up again that night. We brushed teeth in silence. I turned the bathroom light off while he was still rinsing. I climbed into bed and faced the wall, waiting for the mattress to dip behind me. It didn't. He stayed on the couch. That was new. And it didn't hurt the way I thought it might. It just felt inevitable. At some point in the night, I got up for water. I stood in the kitchen, the fridge light the only thing on, thinking how strange it was that a room that once held so much life could feel so empty. The magnets on the fridge were crooked. The calendar still had Karen's birthday in bold pink letters, circled like it meant something. I grabbed a pen and scratched it out, not out of anger, just release. Jason came in the next morning like nothing had happened. He asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no. He asked if I'd seen his other set of keys. I hadn't. He didn't mention the dinner, or the texts, or his mother, and I didn't ask if he was going to. We were both pretending in different ways. He pretended this was temporary. I pretended it ever felt permanent. That night, I folded laundry on the couch. The same laundry I'd leave untouched the next day. And the day after. He walked past me once, twice, 3 times, like a man trying to decide if he was allowed to speak. He didn't. I matched socks in silence. He closed the bedroom door behind him. And there, in that quiet, I realized something simple but true. We were both still here. But only one of us had shown up. Part 6. The house was so quiet, I could hear the hallway clock chewing through the seconds. Tick, tick, tick. Jason hadn't said a word since last night. And I hadn't offered one. It wasn't anger hanging between us. It was heavier than that. It was the weight of knowing something had shifted, and neither of us knew what to do with it. I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed again. He looked down, furrowed his brow, and muttered, "Again?" I didn't ask, but he answered anyway. "It's Mom. She sent some big text to the whole group about the dinner being canceled. Said the venue double booked or some crap." I nodded. He waited for more. A reaction. A defense. Maybe even a laugh. I gave him none. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "They're saying you were upset? About the seating?" There it was. I folded one of his shirts. Slower than necessary. I was. But that's not why I canceled it. His head lifted. "So you're saying you did cancel it?" "Yes." Silence. I picked up the next shirt. The fabric was warm, fresh from the dryer, but I couldn't feel it. He rubbed his palms together. "Jesus, Rachel, you could have just talked to me." I tried. For years. His mouth opened. Closed. He didn't have a retort ready for that one. "They're humiliated," he said quietly. I turned to him. "I've been humiliated for years, Jason." And you laughed along. His face twisted. Confusion, guilt, disbelief, all crammed into one expression. That's not fair, he muttered. No, I said. What's not fair is watching you defend the people who erase me. He stood suddenly, pacing to the window like he needed air. This isn't how you solve things, Rachel. You don't just burn everything down. I looked at him. I didn't burn anything. I just stopped lighting the candles. He didn't know what to say to that. A beat passed. Then he pulled out his phone again. Scrolling, face tightening with each swipe. They posted about it in the church group, he said. Your name's not in it, but everyone knows. I'm sure they do. He finally turned to face me. Why? Why would you do something like this without telling me? I looked at him for a long time. Because telling you would have made you try to stop me. He didn't deny it. And that was all I needed to know. I turned back to the laundry. Matching socks felt more productive than unraveling us. He left the room. Not a word. Not a door slam. Just left. That night, I sat in the living room alone. No television. No wine. No Shelley on speakerphone. Just me. I stared at the empty spot on the wall where a wedding photo used to hang. I'd taken it down during spring cleaning, and never bothered to put it back. Maybe that meant something. Maybe I just forgot. I thought about how much effort I'd spent, making things easy, smoothing edges, keeping the peace. And for what? So Karen could talk about me like a reckless child? So Jason could float above conflict and call it love? Number. No more. My phone lit up again. It was a group text from one of Jason's cousins. Sorry about the mix-up. Hope everyone's okay. I stared at it. No one had said my name. It was like I was a ghost in my own story. Later, Jason came in. He looked tired. Not just physically. There was a weariness in his posture I hadn't seen before. He sat across the room from me, on the arm of the recliner. I told them to take the post down, he said. I nodded. They won't, but, I told them. Okay. A pause. You're really not gonna explain it? I already did. You just didn't hear it when I said it the first 50 times. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, rubbing his wedding ring like it was bothering him. Then he got up again, walked toward the hallway, and said, I'm gonna shower. I didn't answer, because I didn't need to anymore. When the water started running, I looked at the laundry basket in the corner. Still full. Half his. Half mine. That felt about right. Part 7. Karen showed up with a pie. Of course she did. One of those store-bought lattice-top ones in a plastic dome. The kind she used to warm up and pretend she'd baked. She stood on my porch like she was here to borrow sugar. I didn't open the storm door. Just the inside one. We stared at each other through a sheet of mesh. Can we talk? She asked, smiling that tight little smile she uses when she wants something. Her lipstick didn't quite cover the crack in her lip. I looked at the pie, then at her. We're talking. Her smile didn't waver, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Irritation, barely restrained. I thought we could sit down, clear the air, she said. About what? I asked, knowing damn well what. I wanted her to say it. You know, she said, lowering her voice, like the neighbors might be listening. The situation with the birthday. Situation. Like a flat tire. You mean the dinner you planned without a seat for me? I asked. Or the one I canceled with my own severance check? Her jaw tightened. Rachel. We're all very upset. Jason's humiliated. Now I opened the storm door, just wide enough to step out and close it behind me. I bet he is, I said. It's embarrassing when the people you protect stop protecting you back. She blinked. I don't know what that means. I smiled. Just a little. You do. But okay. I walked past her and sat on the porch step. She followed, stiff, perching on the edge of the top step like royalty in exile. There was silence. Not a comfortable one. You really hurt a lot of people, she said finally. You didn't think about how this would reflect on Jason? Or the family? I picked at a splinter in the wood. I think about Jason a lot. A whole lot. I think about how he never asks how I'm really doing. How he changes the subject when I mention your name. That's not true, she snapped. He loves you. That. I know, I said. But loving someone and standing up for them aren't always the same thing. Karen folded her arms. You've always been sensitive. From day one. I looked up at her. And you've always made sure I knew I didn't belong. She inhaled like she was about to deny it, but I kept going. No photos with me in them. No thank you when I helped throw Sierra's baby shower. You invited his ex to the dinner, Karen. You sat her at the damn head table. Her nostrils flared. That was Sierra's doing. And I didn't realize. You didn't care. I cut in. You don't have to like me. But don't act shocked when I stop setting the table for people who won't feed me. Karen stood up, brushing off invisible dust. You think you're better than this family now? I looked up at her. Number? I think I finally realized I don't need to keep proving I'm worth a seat at your table. Especially not to people who set places for ghosts before they set one for me. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You're throwing away everything Jason built for you. I stood too. Slower. Jason didn't build this life alone. I packed his lunches. I kept this house together when I lost my job. I paid for that damn dinner, Karen. I took a step closer. That pie? You can keep it. I'm not sweetening this story for anyone anymore. Karen's mouth opened. But I beat her to it. You came here to fix the optics, not the damage. You're afraid Jason might finally start seeing things. She narrowed her eyes. He won't forgive you for this. Maybe, I said, stepping back. But I will. I turned and walked inside, letting the door close gently behind me. Through the mesh, I saw her pause on the step, unsure for the first time in years. The pie was still in her hands. Part 8. That night, Jason came home late. I heard his truck pull into the driveway just after 10. The engine idled a moment too long before he shut it off. I was sitting in the living room, barefoot, lights off, the soft hum of the dishwasher the only sound in the house. He came in like he always did, keys jangling, boots too loud, the smell of cigarette smoke clinging to his hoodie even though he swore he'd quit. Hey, he said. That was it. Just hey. I didn't answer at first. I wanted to see if he'd fill the silence with anything else. An apology. A question. Even a lie. He didn't. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, opened the fridge, took out a beer. Didn't ask if I wanted one. Finally, I said, Your mom came by. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then, I figured. I looked at him, really looked. Same man I married. Samma jawline. Same worn-out jeans. But something about him felt small. Like he was shrinking beneath the weight of everything he refused to carry. You're not going to ask how it went? I asked. He popped the beer open. I think I already know. That stung. Because if he knew, if he really knew what it had cost me to open that door and stay calm and say the truth out loud and still couldn't say anything, then maybe he'd never known me at all. I told her the truth, I said quietly. He didn't respond. I tried again. I told her how it feels to never be counted, to always be treated like an outsider. I told her I'm done pretending. He took a sip of beer. Didn't look at me. Then finally, you didn't have to go that far, Rach. I stood up. Not fast. Not loud. Just done. That far? He glanced at me. Eyes tired. Canceling the dinner. That was a lot. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was ridiculous. I walked toward him, arms folded. You mean the dinner I wasn't invited to? The one you sat through without even noticing I didn't have a chair? His jaw clenched. I did notice. Then why didn't you do anything? Silence. That was the difference between us. For years, I made excuses for his silence. Told myself he didn't want to make waves. That he was caught in the middle. But the truth? He just didn't want to stand up. Because standing up means risking your place at the table, too. I didn't think you'd leave, he said, voice lower now. I felt something in me snap, not loudly. More like a thread, quietly coming loose after being pulled too tight for too long. That's the problem, I whispered. You didn't think. He set the beer down, finally meeting my eyes. Look, it was your call, but it made a mess, okay? Mom's upset. Sierra's furious. And now everyone thinks that I embarrassed the family? I interrupted. He paused. Yeah. I stepped back. The distance between us now more than physical. Well, good news, I said, voice steady. I'm not interested in being part of that kind of family anymore. His mouth opened, but there were no words. Just silence. And maybe that's what finally settled it. Not the dinner. Not the chair. Not even Karen's visit. It was this. The empty space where his voice should have been. I turned toward the hallway. My voice softer now. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. He didn't argue. Didn't stop me. Didn't even ask why. The sheets in the guest room were cold. I hadn't slept in there since we had the bathroom remodeled 2 summers ago. Back then, we'd laughed about how weird it felt sleeping apart, like teenagers sneaking around their parents. Now, it just felt honest. I lay there in the dark, listening to the faint creak of the floorboards above, where he paced once, maybe twice, and then stopped. No knock. No question. No apology. I rolled over, clutching the edge of the pillow like it was something I could still hold on to, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I finally understood. Sometimes silence isn't the absence of love. It's the evidence of it, or the lack of it. I stared at the ceiling. Art quiet. Hands steady. Tomorrow, I'd start deciding what leaving might really look like. But tonight, I just wanted to feel what it was like. To not be afraid of my own voice anymore. Part 9. The next morning, the house was still. Jason had already left for work. No note. No call. Just the low, empty hum of a house used to women doing the quiet holding, and now missing the hands that held it. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot, the same spot I used to pack his lunches. Used to, before I lost my job, before I started losing myself. There was a knock on the door around 9. Not Karen. The UPS guy. A box I forgot I ordered. Thrift store books and a used journal I must have added on a whim one night when I couldn't sleep. I held it like it was something sacred, not because of what was inside, but because I'd bought something for myself. No one else. No birthday party to plan. No Nietzsche's baby shower. No in-law meal train. Just me. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, and opened the box like it was a ceremony. The book smelled musty. The journal had a soft leather cover, cracked at the spine. Someone else had started it once. Just a few pages in the front. Their handwriting was tight and slanted. A grocery list. A single line that read, "You deserve to be here." I stared at it for a long time. Was it a note to themselves? A quote? A prayer? Didn't matter. It felt like mine now. I spent the morning in silence. No television. No podcast. Just space. And it wasn't hollow. It was room to breathe. I folded laundry. Cleaned the grout in the bathroom tile. Lit a candle Jason always said gave him a headache. It smelled like lavender. And something sharp underneath. I let it burn anyway. At noon, I drove to the little bakery downtown, the one I always passed but never stopped in. I ordered a slice of pie. Peach. Not store-bought. Not for a family dinner. Just one slice. For me. I sat by the window, fork in hand. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I tasted every bite. Not in a hurry. Not between errands. Not while pretending to listen to a conversation that left me invisible. Just There. When I got home, I took the extra dining chair from the garage. The one Karen had made Jason's store months ago to make space. I brought it back inside, wiped it down, set it at the table. Not for company, not for Jason, not for her. For me, I sat in it, ran my hand along the worn edge, and smiled. That night, Jason came home early. He paused when he saw the chair, didn't say anything, just stood there, like the furniture had moved, and he didn't know how to stand in the room anymore. "Dinner's in the fridge," I said. "I'll eat later," he replied. I nodded, then looked up and said gently, not cruelly, "I'm going to look for work again. Something small to start." He blinked. "I thought you were taking a break." "I was," I said, "but I'm done resting in places where I'm not seen." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly, and I could tell he didn't quite know what I meant. But that was okay, because I wasn't saying it for him anymore. Later I pulled out the journal, wrote my first line, "I don't need a seat at their table." I built my own, closed it, let the candle burn just a little longer, then turned off the lights. Not everything was fixed. The bills still waited. The marriage was still cracked. The job search would be slow, but something had changed. Not out there, in here. And that was enough to start again. Looking back, it's easy to believe that silence keeps the peace, that if we just wait long enough, serve quietly enough, we'll earn our place. But the truth is, being tolerated is not the same as being loved. This story wasn't about a chair at a dinner table. It was about years of erasure wrapped in politeness, and the quiet, steady courage it takes to finally say, "Enough." From Rachel to you. If you've ever wondered whether you were asking for too much, just to be seen, just to be counted, I hope you hear this. You're not. You were never the problem for needing space, only for believing you didn't deserve it. Aubrey. There's no clear ending yet. The wounds are still tender. The marriage still uncertain. But there's something powerful about a woman reclaiming her own voice, even if it shakes at first. And maybe that's the real beginning. Have you ever sat at a table where you felt like a stranger? Have you ever made yourself smaller to fit? If you're on your own journey of finding your voice, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. Someone needs to hear it. Maybe even you.